Hi, friends, and welcome to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm going to be giving my early predictions for the Wanda Vision Disney Plus series plot points. Roll that credit. So what do we know specifically about the Disney Plus series that are in development? For this one in particular, we do know a few things in great detail. For instance, we know that Jack Schaefer has been announced as the writer and showrunner for this series. He actually served as the head writer for the script of the Captain Marvel film. According to Olsen, filming will begin in this fall of this year for this series, and of course we all know that in November will be the official launch for the Disney Plus platform. Now, if what Olsen says is true and the filming isn't beginning until this fall, I don't anticipate that we'll be seeing this particular series for sure in that initial launch in November, so I would anticipate that we probably will see it sometime in the spring of 2020. In that same interview with Vanity Fair, Olsen went on to mention that she believes the show will have a 6-hour runtime. Now, this could, of course, just be a flat 6 hours, each at 60 minutes, or we could see Disney do something a little bit different. We could see them break this up into anywhere from 30 to 90-minute segments, maybe like a 3 mini film franchise, potentially maybe several films at different lengths. We really aren't sure how Disney is going to break up their franchises that are specific to the platform yet. We've seen various different lengths do very well on both Hulu and Netflix with their original programming, so it'll be very interesting to see how Disney selects to kind of set the standard for their model of shows that they do for their platform specifically. Moving back to WandaVision specifically, there was one more piece of information we got from Olsen in that Vanity Fair article that really gives us a starting point on where to look at in this WandaVision franchise. And that is, in that interview, she mentioned that during the Disney Plus kind of press announcement event, she saw a concept photo for the franchise that showed it taking place in the 1950s. Now, this is a very interesting point because this is another recent kind of news piece that we found out means that more of this phase is not going to be taking place in our current time. Of course, with Endgame, the middle act of that movie took primarily in the past, with many of our heroes returning to MCU timeline points that we've already seen. Now, moving forward, though, we already know that much of the Loki Plus potential franchise is going to be taking place somewhere in the 70s or 80s. Most likely, Captain Marvel 2 will return to the same story point lines where she left off at the end of Captain Marvel 1 in the 1990s. We potentially know that the Black Widow film will primarily deal with her origin stories, flashing back to some time also in the 90s based upon the age of everything and how old her character potentially is, so late 80s, sometime in the 90s with her film. And if the rumors are true and the Fantastic Four are returning and everything that we know about their potential franchise in the MCU, it will be taking place at least partially in the 60s. So what we're kind of seeing here is this trend of potentially Phase 4 taking place a lot in the past and not so much in our current timeline. Regardless to how this will kind of affect the MCU Phase 4 as a whole, it does raise a lot of questions about how the two of them are going to end up in this time period if that is the true case. But of course, my bigger question leading into this franchise is Vision? Now, Wanda has been a character that has received a lot of loss during her time in the MCU. She lost her parents due to the civil unrest in her country, then she lost her country as a whole due to the events of Ultron, then during that process she lost her brother, and now she has lost the man that she has come to love in the events of the Infinity War and Endgame, and that all before she herself was snapped away. Now imagine this highly magically charged force of nature coming to the realization that when everyone else returned, Vision did not, and that whole realization kind of setting in. This could be potentially very catastrophic for the MCU, so they're going to have to deal with this very early on the series, on how Vision is going to return to the franchise. So I believe this is where we're going to start in episode 1, and this being the major resolution of that initial episode. Now, there are a few ways that we could potentially bring him back, but of course, we are not dealing with the Infinity Stones anymore. And so with the Mind Stone out, we'll have to figure out how we're going to resurrect him without that device. because that is honestly what created Vision. So that's going to create a kind of an interesting hurdle here if we're truly not going to be utilizing the stones moving forward. However, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think we'll see repercussions and characters still embodying some of those stones. Basically, Wanda herself is a walking reality stone. We know Captain Marvel has the power of the Space Stone within her, and of course Vision is a representation of the Mind Stone. So I don't think that we're going to see those go away anytime soon. So I think we could potentially see something that would be incredibly lazy and I think a major disservice to the fans, but because now the current Thanos doesn't exist, and so he never killed Vision to get the Mind Stone, we could just see him rephase into reality as if nothing happened. Again, this would be extremely lazy, and I hope this is not the way we see this happen. The second option would be utilizing the theme of time travel, with Wanda going back to save Vision right before Thanos kills him, and then potentially from here spiraling in that escape and ending up in the 1950s. Now, this, of course, would then kind of cause a divergent in the timeline, but I think that is going to be a major phase 4 theme, as we know that the Loki series is going to run with this, and with so many other time kind of displaced in the so much time displacement in the MCU timeline moving forward with so many potential films taking place in the past, I think this will kind of play up a lot in this franchise, and we already know that that's kind of a major issue in the current season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with them dealing with all the time travel they've done in the recent history of the show. So I think that will be a major theme of Phase 4, even if they haven't really announced that yet. So that is a very strong possibility. The final option, I think, would be a really fun cameo for the franchise. We know that in Shuri's lab, she has all the schematics from Vision as she was trying to separate him from the Mind Stone, and she has shown that they can separate the two without it killing Vision, so she could potentially use to rebuild Vision. And of course, we know that Wakanda does have all the resources and the materials to make the actual body of Vision, as he is made from that precious metal only found in Wakanda. So, and that would also have been just a kind of a fun little cameo from Shuri, who is such a fan favorite, to be kind of seen in that first episode of the show. Of course, Shuri has the ability to separate the Mind Stone from Vision without killing him. However, Vision still needs the Mind Stone to give him life. And so we will see that whole Infinity Stones, which aren't a part of the next phase, but really are play into this potential storyline. Now, this is actually the kind of storyline and the theory that I like the most, so we're going to go with this one for this video. So with Wanda, she also is built from the Mind Stone, her powers granted to her via experiments with the staff. Now, this means that she has some of that Mind Stone energy in her as well, and we could see her working with Shuri's tech prowess to kind of mesh the two, magic and technology, to rebuild Vision. And this would make for a really interesting kind of point, and the fact that potentially the reason why these two were drawn together and kind of have become romantically linked is their connection of the Mind Stone. Both of them having the Mind Stone within them, that Mind Stone recognizing the other and kind of drawing the two together, making them basically soul stone mates. I believe something will happen here in this process that will be what ultimately leads to the main conflict of the series. Now, the simpler option I think here would be, as these two work together, it could potentially kind of awaken a dormant strand of Ultron coding that lives inside of Vision's kind of coding as well. This, of course, would be a little bit more of a straightforward and predictable path with the Ultron storyline. And so I don't really kind of prefer this one, so I'm going to go with my preferred one, which is that by transferring the Mind Stone's power to awaken the Vision from Wanda, some of the darkness that lives inside of her transfers to Vision as well, kind of creating and building an evil kind of version of the Vision within him throughout the series that ultimately kind of explodes and creates the major conflict. Now, I will say this right here real quick, that if I did see Ultron re-enter the MCU, I would like it to be in WandaVision somehow, if not this season, maybe a second season, because I feel like him and Vision are kind of the opposites of one another, so their conflict would be the best kind of reintroduction of Ultron to the MCU if they ever decide to use the character again. To talk about this potential growing darkness inside of the Vision, I want us to point to Tom King's run of the character this last year in the comics. His story, The Visions, follows the Vision as he moves to a suburban area to start a more normal life, in the process creating 3 synthetic human robots much like himself, one a wife and 2 kids, a daughter and a son. Now, all these are versions of himself and actually look almost identical to him in their own respective genders and age ranges. However, this does not go quite to plan as events unfold and cause each of them to lose their humanity that they so desperately want, and as a darkness settles into each of them as each of their minds slowly deteriorate. Now, this could be exactly what Olsen is hinting at in this story, and the most likely possible storyline for them, with the two of them in this post-Endgame world wanting to settle down, much like we saw them trying to escape the craziness during Infinity War and just have a life of the two of them. We could see them move to the suburbs to try to achieve this. This taken a step further by the 1950s kind of setting of them trying to reach this more domestic time period, with everything being just a little bit more simple. Now, however, the darkness that we see set in the family of Vision in this comic book run would all happen within Vision himself, with the darkness that allowed the Mind Stone to create Wanda's reality warping powers now affecting Vision and his own mind starting to deteriorate. That's how you say it. Here, I'm going to say we're going to be jumping into somewhere between episode 3 and the storyline. Now, what we could see potentially happen is that as Wanda realizes what's going on with the Vision, attempt to save him. Now, I could see her doing this by herself or seeking out assistance to kind of help pull this dark energy out of Vision. Either way, by herself or with the help of others, I say she will be successful. However, we know the laws of energy and it cannot be created or destroyed, so that dark energy is going to have to go somewhere. Now, here I see the major metaphor of this franchise, with this dark energy infecting the surrounding neighbors. This will be kind of playing up on the idea of the prejudices of the 1950s and some of those same prejudices that we can see in today's world. The neighbors who previously seemed okay with the supercharged witch and her robotic husband living next door, suddenly driven crazy by this dark energy force, kind of revolting against the couple as it infects the community at a large. This potentially creating our ultimate villain for the last half of the series. Now, again here, I think this is a great point to take and look at those other franchises with the MCU about who we will see kind of interacting with the couple in these kind of sequence of events. So potentially bringing in maybe characters we don't immediately recognize from the comics, but becoming major players and recognizable names in the MCU. These playing potentially the ally that helps Wanda pull the darkness from Vision, or just named neighbors, and eventually that final villain for the characters at the end of the franchise, making some kind of lesser known names bigger players in the MCU. Going back to the comics as the potential, well, not the potential, the of course source material for this series, I will first step on to the King Vision storyline that we have already talked about. Now, the interesting thing about this run is that it is narrated by none of the characters that are actually in the story. So none of the Visions actually play as the narrator. The story is narrated by two different characters, the first half being done by a character named Agatha, and the second by Wanda herself. Now, Agatha Harkness is a very interesting character that has a lot of heavy ties to Wanda and the Scarlet Witch. She actually serves as a mentor often for Wanda. Now, Agatha Harkness is a character that is believed to be one of the last remaining Salem witches in existence, meaning that she has very similar magical abilities to Wanda. In this mentorship role, she actually teaches Wanda how to tap into this more magic witch-based powers, and ultimately helping her control and understand her own abilities a lot more. This would give us a great kind of origin story extension to Wanda and her powers, and kind of add a nice element to this series. In addition, this would be kind of a great kind of reference to Agatha, as she is very much so directly related to the comics, and potentially major aspects of the comics moving forward, not only just Wanda's story. For the villain of the franchise, I think this will come again from King's story directly. In this, we see Eric Williams, aka the Grim Reaper, in the comics, kind of lead the charge of the neighborhood against the Visions, kind of saying that they are unnatural and they do not belong in their suburban community. Now, in the comics, the Grim Reaper holds some kind of a major hyper-powered scythe-type weapon, and that's where he gets his namesake from. However, growing up and throughout the comics, he has several run-ins with the Avengers, so we do know a little bit more about him. Now, specifically as a child, he is always kind of referenced as having a growing darkness within him, often kind of being abused and talked down to because of his tendencies towards evil, ultimately through this process becoming the Grim Reaper and taking on that mantra. Now, again, I could see this growing darkness that is talked about in his origin stories as a kid being that same darkness that's pulled from Vision and then infecting him as an adult in this storyline. One thing that's really interesting to mention, though, that is Eric has a brother. Now, his brother is kind of the polar opposite of him, named Simon, and he is actually praised by his parents and everyone around them as a kind of good doer and is very much so loved by those around him, always kind of on the up and up to be kind of a hero. Now, in the comic books, he becomes a character named Wonder Man, who is also kind of supercharged on his own right. However, this is done by Baron Zemo, who manipulates him against the Avengers. Ultimately, though, he does realize what is going on and does the right thing, sacrificing himself to save the Avengers from Baron Zemo's plot, which is very interesting to mention that if both of these characters right here, because Eric Williams, potentially the Grim Reaper, being the villain in this franchise, we know already that Baron Zemo is potentially going to be making a reappearance in the franchise for Disney Plus called The Falcon and Winter Soldier. So that would be a very interesting tie-in between these two, but that's a different video altogether. Now, again, I think the major theme is going to come directly from King's storyline, with the major kind of idea being the longing for a normal life and family for Vision, and in this telling, Wanda. However, this happiness and seeking out for normalcy isn't ultimately achieved in the way that they had hoped, defining their own happiness and a version of that along the way. However, I do want to say that I think you will see them, if this kind of franchise continues into multiple seasons, them staying in the 1950s and kind of working to establish this version of normal and happiness for the two of them, even though it won't necessarily be as successful, just like their escape to Europe wasn't successful in Infinity War. This being possible because we do have much more technology now in this in-game future for time travel, so potentially with them being able to communicate across timeline to the current Avengers in our time here, well, not even our time, 5 years our senior, and being able to transport back and forth through that timeline to kind of make appearances and team up films in the future, so that kind of being an easy solve. Though, we're at that point where I want to know what you think. Do you think this is going to be the show that we see them moving back to the 50s, seeking out a normal life, ultimately not being able to do so, but finding their own version of that simple life? Let me know down in the comments below, and also while you're down there, let me know what you would like to see from WandaVision and their series on the Disney Plus platform. As we find out more information about this one and the others, we will definitely be talking about it. I am going to be doing these same kind of plot predictions for all of those franchises that we know for sure are coming to Disney Plus. So subscribe and set the alerts for those, because you do not want to miss a thing. Until then, though, I love you all 3,000, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!